Hit it! Bam!
Ladies and gentlemen, if you could please join us in the fifth floor ballroom here. We're going to be getting going very shortly. Thank you all for joining us here today. We have a wonderful program. This is what you as the members of RotaryOne have asked me to build into our programming, to take the problems of the day, to take the challenges of the day, and lend our collective wisdom to determine a path forward by raising awareness to the things that are causing ill in society and what we can do to make it better. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Paul McConville, and I have the honor of serving as the 113th President of RotaryOne. We are very excited to have a great program here today. As many of you know, we're going to be having a panel after lunch with some very esteemed people who are focused on the diabetes issue in today's marketplace. Please also note that today is Giving Tuesday, so we're going to be having a little bit of a talk afterwards from our friend Connor G on our annual campaign. What I'd like to do at this point in time is just introduce our guests at the head table. First, we have Dr. Joshua Hedman joining us. Could we have a warm applause for Dr. Hedman? And I'm doing this in order of the way it's printed on the page for me to make it easier. We also have with us one of our fellow Rotarians who I only knew her as District Governor Pat. Okay? And then once I found out what she did when we had a discussion about diabetes, I said, wow, she really, what she does during the day versus what she does for Rotary. So we have the honor of having Pat Merriweather Argus with us here today, past District Governor. We also have Judge Allison Conlon joining us. Thank you. Karen Cross-Hawk joining us as well. Marilyn Cornelis joining us as well. We have Stephanie Peterson joining us as well from American Diabetes. Okay. Jenna Archuleta, who is the Major Gift Officer of American Diabetes Association, as well as a RotaryOne member. Sarah Freed joining us as well here at the head table. Thank you. And my friend and colleague, Bill Feeney from UBS, joining us here today. This is a very important topic. It's one that's near and dear to me. For those of you who don't know, my nephew passed away about 1.5 years ago from diabetes. He was diagnosed in his early teenage years. He went through what I consider to be the highs and the lows, which all of you who are familiar with diabetes know. Okay. And he passed away because he kind of got out on his own. He was 28 years of age. And, sometimes you have access to great health care. Sometimes you have access to the right tools to help deal with a particular issue. His partner went to a Blackhawks game, came back, and he was unresponsive. He went low. It caused a lot of issues within my family, quite frankly, because his mom had always been on him. Test. Did you eat? Did you eat? Did you eat? Did you eat? And so for me, today is kind of a payback moment in my world, where maybe we could do a little bit of good here today, raising awareness for this important problem and challenge in society. And we have a lot of friends here today who are going to share their intelligence with us on this panel. So I would like to say thank you to all of you for joining us here today. We are going to be meeting afterwards for a sober message discussion, and many of you who are familiar with the sober message discussion know that we try to take on the issues of the day after we hear what the experts say, and then try to develop some timely and actionable Rotary service projects to deal with some of the things that we talk about, so that we just don't talk about it, that we actually go do something. And Rotary is an organization that does things. And I look forward to that discussion forthwith after our meeting today. So could we please enjoy your lunch, and we'll be back up shortly thereafter to begin the program, and thank you once again for joining us. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you everyone for joining the Rotary Club Club of Chicago as they present the American Diabetes Association panel for a discussion about the growing public health crisis of diabetes. I'm Jenna Archuleta, and I'm a philanthropy officer based here in Chicago. As a philanthropy officer, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that today is Giving Tuesday. And on Giving Tuesday, the ADA is pausing to thank our most generous supporters, and I just wanted to extend that thanks to you for all the good you do. I look around the room, and almost everybody that I've talked with is involved in charitable work. Blessings in a Backpack, Bright Promises Foundation, the Rotary Foundation, A Safe Haven, the RotaryOne Foundation, American Diabetes Association, and many others. This Giving Tuesday is a good reminder to take count of all we do, feel proud of the difference that we're making, and also to strengthen our resolve to do all we can to help others. If we give until it hurts, we'll never have any regrets that we didn't do all we can to solve the problems that are important to us. Today, nearly 10% of the United States population has diabetes. An additional 86 million adults have prediabetes, a condition that will likely lead to diabetes if it's not addressed. Diabetes disproportionately affects certain ethnic minorities and vulnerable, often underserved populations. The American Diabetes Association is fighting for millions of families and individuals, working to prevent and cure diabetes and improve the lives of all people with diabetes. We are a powerful, caring community that is grounded in strong science and innovative thinking, but there's still so much work to do. Scientific breakthroughs are years in the making. Legal battles continue, and federal funding is not keeping pace with the growing prevalence of diabetes. We're joined today by panelists who are personally and/or professionally affected by diabetes and have decided to join the association in deepening diabetes research, advocating for individual rights, and steering the mission. It is a true pleasure to introduce Dr. Joshua Hedman, a podiatrist in private practice here in Chicago. Dr. Hedman is a member of the American Diabetes Association Community Leadership Board here in Chicago, and he's also a former member of the Rotary Club of San Antonio. Please give a warm Rotary welcome for today's moderator, Dr. Joshua Hedman.
Hello, how y'all doing?
Right.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much. Thank you, Rotary, for having us. I'm a past Rotarian at the Rotary Club of San Antonio, so to you fellow Rotarians, thank you for all that you do. We can have the panelists come up. I'm going to introduce them shortly. Just a little brief history about myself. I have type 1 diabetes. I was in my residency at the age of 27 when I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. My specialty is foot and ankle, and during my residency we did a lot of diabetic limb salvage. So it's pretty easy for me to understand the disease and its grave complications. But my mom and other people around me, they really didn't. So it's a scary, scary time when someone gets told of this diagnosis. And if you don't understand it yourself when you're told that you have diabetes, I don't know how you're going to have family support and other people helping you. So I'm sure a lot of people in this room know someone, maybe even someone close that has diabetes. And it's scary if you don't know about it. Things aren't that scary if you have knowledge, because knowledge is power. So I encourage all of you to just soak in this information from people who do research in the area or from people who live with it on a daily matter like myself. Just real quickly, I'm going to go over what diabetes is. Simply, it just means you have high blood sugar. And I can have it for a couple of different reasons. Like myself, I have type 1 diabetes. That means that my pancreas does not produce insulin. So when y'all are eating your good cakes and your nice food, your body breaks it down into a really simple sugar called glucose. And that sugar has to get into cells in your body to provide energy. And insulin is what makes that happen. So if you don't have insulin, like someone like myself can't make it by myself, then your blood sugar goes really, really, really high, and it stays in that bloodstream, and that's where all these bad complications happen. So we have to take insulin from an outside source to make sure that blood sugar gets into the cells that need it. Okay, so that's a general overview of type 1. Type 2 also is high blood sugars. Usually you have insulin that just doesn't work as well. Now there's a lot of different ways that could break down in the pathway, and maybe eventually you don't have enough insulin and you need to be on some sort of an insulin regimen like shots or an insulin pump. But sometimes if you catch it early, you could be on like a diet, an exercise regimen. You could take oral pills, and like I said earlier, you can also be on insulin if that's necessary. Man, I don't have enough time to talk about everything that I'd love to talk about, but type 2, though, it's such an awareness and education factor, and that's where the American Diabetes comes in. That's why I love partnering with this organization. I have type 1 diabetes. It doesn't seem like it's a natural pairing for me to be all in with the ADA. Professionally, it does, because that's what I see, and that's like 90% of the population with diabetes. But they get it, and they are doing a lot in research, and they are very, very out there in the community with type 1, especially here in Chicago. All those kids programs with diabetes camps, that's all American Diabetes Association. So they do it right. Jenny, you did a good job covering all the numbers and basics. I had that written down, so I don't think I really need to go into that. Interesting, though, that Illinois does see it's above average when it comes to the prevalence. So I think you said something about like 9% of the prevalence in the country. And Illinois here, it's 12.8%. I think Chicago's the driving factor with that. So that's definitely a lot higher than the national average. And it costs us over $12 billion. So there's an economic cost to this as well. So if you're not affected by it personally, I'm sure at some point in your business you probably will be affected by this. All right, let's get on to the good stuff. I'm going to introduce the panelists, and then we're gonna get going. Let's see if you guys sat in the right line here. All right, Dr. Marilyn Cornelis. How you doing? All right, Dr. Cornelis, she is a PhD at Northwestern University Medical School. Her specialty is in genetics of coffee consumption, caffeine metabolism, taste preferences, and other dietary behaviors. She has partnered with the ADA in more recent funding for her coffee metabolemics and diabetes research. That's a big word. All right. Karen. All right. Karen, you've been living with diabetes since 1988. All right. All right. She established the Diabetes Education and Support Ministry at her church in 1999. So you see this yourself every day and in your community every day. Panelist number 3, the Honorable Allison Conlon, who was appointed to the Illinois Supreme Court. Oh, you guys didn't say that. All right, so we're going over here. She was appointed by the Illinois Supreme Court in February of 2015. Unfortunately, she is the mother of a young girl who has type 1 diabetes, and she is the 2016 American Diabetes Association Ambassador. And y'all know Pat, I guess, so I don't really need to introduce Pat. She sounds like she's like Superwoman, basically, with Rotary and everything else that she does. But she has a long-standing history in the healthcare, including 26 years at the Illinois Hospital Association, where she was Senior Vice President. So you definitely have a lot of knowledge in this area, too, and more of the socioeconomic costs of this program. All right, so let's get on to some of the good stuff here. I'm going to ask a question for all of you to sort of take a couple of minutes to answer. Simple one, tell us about your connection to the American Diabetes Association. Go for it.
As you already mentioned, the ADA is actually funding some of my research. It has a great grant program, and I received a grant about 3 years ago. It was a Young Investigator Award, pretty much. And it funded my my interest in the connection looking at coffee and type 2 diabetes. For some of you who might not be aware, coffee, as we know, is one of the most widely consumed beverages in the world, and it actually has been linked to a reduced risk of type 2 diabetes. And I'm especially interested in understanding the details or the mechanisms that link coffee to type 2 diabetes. And ADA has given me the opportunity to kind of pursue that area of research. In addition to the research, I've also, through this grant, had the opportunity of working with the community. I've been invited to a couple of these types of events, and these have been really great. Not only networking with fellow researchers, but also in the community, and getting feedback on questions and concerns regarding diabetes. In addition, the ADA is actually coordinates one of the largest scientific meetings in the world on diabetes of all types. And that provides a platform in which researchers in diabetes can share their knowledge on diabetes and kind of build kind of like stepping stones towards new research avenues and ideas. And that's obviously been a big thing for me. That's my biggest connection with ADA.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I have a very strong family history of diabetes, and my aunt had type 1 diabetes, and actually I did a science fair project on diabetes when I was in 7th grade. And little did I know that many years later that I would be diagnosed with diabetes, but she passed away at age 30 due to complications of diabetes. And also my grandmother had diabetes and passed away as a double amputee due to complications of diabetes. I began attending educational meetings that the American Diabetes Association hosted in the 80s to learn more about diabetes, and I think they're like the precursor to what has now become known as the Diabetes Expos, where there would be healthcare professionals who would provide information in panels and different classes, and these were held at high schools and other community locations. And so I started going to those to learn more about diabetes. And then once I was diagnosed with diabetes, I wanted to get more information on a more regular basis. So I started attending some community meetings that the ADA developed and hosted in communities. And I went to one that was near my home and near my church. And I was very impressed with that. And in fact, that's how I found my physician, who is very involved with the American Diabetes Association. So I have been a long-time volunteer serving in many roles, and this is very important to me because this is my life and my priority, and I want to help others who have diabetes, and that's why I established the Diabetes Education and Support Ministry at my church, and we partner often with ADA on various programs.
Mary Weather.
I'm Executive Vice President of Project Patient Care. It's an international patient and family and provider engagement organization. I just joined there about a month ago, and prior to that I headed up the Medicare programs quality programs in Illinois, Iowa, and Colorado, and parts of Virginia and Maryland. But what struck me is we had an initiative at the Medicare Quality Improvement Organization, national initiative aimed at managing diabetes and also preventing diabetes. And our project is still going on. It's focused in disparate communities. We worked hand in hand with the Chicago Housing Authority, Salvation Army, many community and faith-based organizations, and worked with people that had diabetes or pre-diabetes, and spent 6 weeks with each group of patients with diabetes, undertaking a cultural and personal change, where they came with goals that had to be set each week, how they managed their meeting their goals, and again, the idea was to get them so they could manage their diabetes, so it would prevent hospitalizations. And one of the things that struck me the most is the increase in the number of dialysis centers in Illinois. When I first started with the Medicare program, it was about 130, and in 5 years, it's now up to 286 dialysis centers. Most of the patients that go on dialysis are either, I shouldn't say either, it's hypertension or diabetes or the combination. And the combination of hypertension and diabetes will get you on a fast track to dialysis, which for many of you that aren't familiar, it's 3 days a week commonly, And it's 4 hours at a time that you're hooked up to a machine, and that's your life, is that machine. So very excited about the opportunity of working with the ADA and preventing and also addressing diabetes. On the Rotary side, you know, diabetes isn't just in the United States, it's international. And India and China lead the world in the number of diabetics. And when you think about it, you know, I look at you, doctor, you're very thin, very fit. Most of the people in India and China that are diabetics are very thin and very fit. It's their diet of rice. And so with Rotary, we put in the first dialysis center outside of Hyderabad for the working poor, because it was primarily men that were committing suicide because they couldn't afford the dialysis center and they didn't want to take the money away from their children's education. So the Rotarians in India approached us and we put together a dialysis center, and it can compete with any dialysis center here. It's saving lives. But the thing that's different about India, two things. One, the people that work there are unbelievably compassionate and caring, and they spend time talking about how to manage their dialysis, their diabetes. But they also do a day-long program for anyone that comes into the center, and it's focused on, with the family, on how to prevent diabetes, what you need to do and how you need to help the patient manage their diabetes. So again, it's a key issue. Diabetes is only growing. It's not shrinking. And so working with the ADA, we are going to be able to make a difference and prevent diabetes as well as help people manage their diabetes.
So I'm a diabetes mom. I have a daughter, Amelia, who was diagnosed on August 28th of 2009, a day I'll never forget. We had driven back from Pittsburgh a few weeks before she was diagnosed, and Amelia had to stop at almost every rest stop on the way home, which was really unusual. But of course, I didn't think anything of it. Luckily, she had a regular doctor's appointment before school started. Her blood sugar was over 500. I was caught completely blindsided, didn't know a lot about diabetes, didn't think that we had type 1 diabetes in my family. We were very lucky that we had that appointment and that she didn't have some tragic complication like having a seizure or something from having constantly high blood sugar. But I will say, I was absolutely devastated when she was diagnosed, just blown away, and really worried about limitations in life. As Dr. Hedman says, knowledge is power. I had no knowledge and felt very powerless. We went back to school. I thought I was really bad at all-things medical. I didn't know if I could give a shot the right way. I was really afraid of hurting her. I was embarrassed to pull out syringes in public places. I mean, I was operating from ground zero learning about all this. I'm happy to say it remains a frustrating disease, but I'm not distraught. That took care of itself more quickly than I expected. But one thing was diabetes at school as a third grader was a real challenge. I went to school and read books. I answered wonderfully candid questions from third graders about, why did this happen to her? Is it contagious? Am I going to get it? I mean, some of the best questions I've ever had from this class. But she was the only kid in school with diabetes. My connection to the ADA, my most profound one, is the camps. Because the summer after Amelia was diagnosed, she went to a week-long camp out in the suburbs with a bunch of kids ages 4 through 9 who all had diabetes and their siblings. And suddenly, whipping out a syringe, kids flailing around with pumps running around, grabbing each other, was the absolute norm. And as a parent, it was the first time I ever left her anywhere and didn't just have these pangs inside that something might happen to her, because most people don't know what to do. And a lot of people get highs and lows mixed up, innocently so, but that can have very real, very bad consequences. There's also just a spirit about the camps, a sense of humanity, a sense that you're all in this together. There were separate parent sessions that I went to. Amelia came home one day and said, you know what I learned at camp today? That the only difference between me and somebody without diabetes is that their pancreas is on the inside and mine's on the outside. And it just blew me away. These are the kinds of things that happen at camp, not even on a daily, like on an hourly basis. So she went to the camps, now she is a volunteer counselor at the camps. I send a child to camp every year because I think it's an amazing thing for them to be together. And so that's my connection, and she's now the youth ambassador and runs around promoting the ADA with a beautiful staff she's been given. I'm kind of jealous of the staff. So that's my connection.
Thank you for sharing that. That's a really tough personal story. So, well, how does it affect the daily routine having a daughter that has type 1 diabetes?
It did force us to be a lot more regimented in what we do. One thing that we do in our family is I think we're pretty predictable about the kind of food that Amelia eats because we kind of, I feel like as a parent of a diabetic, my main job is to be an expert in Amelia's body and what it does under certain conditions. So food is a big part. I think we sort of eat the predictable things, which is great because I'm not an awesome cook, so it's really good to limit things too, but it's sort of more predictable diet. That said, there are so many things that affect blood sugar. So as much as I'd love to say I'm an expert in my daughter's body, it's not possible to be perfect with diabetes. You just throw that out. Things like stress, oh my goodness, teenage hormones I think have a huge effect. Emotions, the weather can have an effect. Whether you got too little sleep, whether you got too much sleep. So there are great strategies that wonderful medical personnel have given us and really educated us, but it is something that you constantly think about. And unlike many diseases, it doesn't have flare-ups and sort of recessions. It's there all the time and can be affected by so many things. So she's very good at testing herself regularly. I think in many ways, if she had to get this, it was good that she got it when she did because she still listened to me and was still forming habits. I think for teenagers who get diagnosed and adults who are so fixed in their habits, I think it's such a challenge. So she does fine despite the teenage years, which are kind of known as a hard time for kids with diabetes. We have a regimen.
Sounds pretty typical in a type 1 family. You're doing a good job. How about you, Karen? What's your daily routine look like?
Well, as you said before, I was diagnosed in 1988, so I've been living with this for a while. I began taking insulin about 25 years ago. So when I was first diagnosed, I was managing diet and exercise. And after I had a baby, I guess that kind of took me over the limit, and I had to start taking insulin. But the daily routine requires monitoring, and I'm wearing a pump. I've been wearing a pump for about the last 7 years, and I will say that pumps have been a lot longer than that. And I struggled with getting a pump because psychologically, I didn't want to deal with wearing something 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That didn't appeal to me. But once I read more about it and got it, I really love having a pump. And about 3 months ago, I just got a continuous glucose monitor. And so what that means is my blood glucose is being monitored constantly. And so before I was taking my blood sugar about 6 or 7 times a day. So the continuous glucose monitor is a wonderful new addition to my routine, and I know that it's going to really help me in keeping my A1C in the range that it should be in. So I'm just very grateful for all of the new innovations that have come into play over the years, because when I think about what people's routines were like 30, 40 years ago, I had an aunt who was much older, who was diabetic, and when she took shots, it was like with a glass syringe, and the gauges on those syringes were pretty big. So the other thing about a routine is living with diabetes. You can't really do a lot of things spontaneously because you always have to plan. You have to plan to have your supplies and a snack if you need it and that sort of thing. And so if you're traveling and that sort of thing, you have to make sure that you have everything that you need.
I think you brought up an interesting point, both of you actually. When as you get a little bit older, you get set in your ways, and I know I come across this like all the time. Sort of an older individual who has type 2 diabetes maybe, and they probably should be on insulin. It's gotten to that point, and they remembered grandma or their aunt, and they basically probably maybe passed away within months of being on insulin. It wasn't the insulin that really put them over the edge, it was all the complications leading up to it. So sometimes it's tough to, if there's sort of a, I don't know, if there's a family history and there were some bad complications, it's really tough to sort of turn that tide and say like, well, things are a lot different now than they were like 40 years ago. It's a really tough obstacle to overcome. In certain communities, it's harder to overcome in others, but to get someone to, maybe listen to that medical advice and, let them know that things are a little bit different now than what they were when Aunt so-and-so, had it in the 50s. So two of you brought up some good points there. Marilyn, so talk to us about some of the latest and brightest research in the field of diabetes and how the ADA is helping in that arena.
Okay, I guess, obviously there's never any shortage on research going on, but I guess maybe the hottest areas right now are probably the genetics of diabetes and also obesity. One of the big things with genetics is that not only will identifying the genes help us predict diabetes and possibly intervene prior to its development, but identifying genes that are related to these diseases also provides some insight into how these diseases are developed. So if a particular gene is altered, then maybe that's a new pathway that we might be focused on. That can provide opportunities for targeted interventions or even development of drugs for treatment. Another hot area is beta cell function. Where obviously type 1 and type 2 diabetes are very different forms of the disease, but beta cells, which produce the insulin, are a commonality among these different types of diabetes. And there's great interest in understanding how these develop from the beginning and their function, and also ways in which we can regenerate them and replace them, so that maybe in the future, instead of providing insulin, we can go in there and correct beta cells, so we can get rid of the issue. For those of you who are kind of really not into understanding the genetics or the beta cells and all these pathways, you might appreciate the interest in translating research into practice. Like, as scientists, we can work in a lab and do experiments on animals and come up with a key gene or a biomarker. But how can we implement that in practice? How can we disseminate that information to physicians and even the community? For example, for me, if we know that increasing your vegetable and fruit consumption is key for prevention of diabetes, well, let's do that. Well, some people can't afford to have access to fresh fruits and vegetables. And these are some of the things that a scientist don't take into account. I think some of you touched on this, like some of their key challenges that prevent us from implementing this research. And I think that's always a great interest in moving the research into translation.
Absolutely. But there's like a big data bank for people who have type 1 diabetes, right? They can go get a blood test and they sort of have their genetic code marked, and they're doing that in Chicago too, right?
Yes. That's actually funded by the National Institute of Health Research, and they're really interested in what they call precision medicine. And at Northwestern, in our department, one of the professors there actually received a big grant on precision medicine, where we will be putting together a biobank where we tie patients' records with genetics and also additional information, and track them over time to see what they're doing today, how that impacts their risk for diseases. And that provides a very efficient platform upon which we can conduct a variety of different types of research. Not only diabetes, but also other conditions or complications of diabetes.
Great, thank you. So in the interest of time, we'll sort of speed through this and give a little bit of a closing remarks from everybody. So this is some more of an action plea, I guess, to our community members out here, is how can these Rotarians, how can the community partner with the American Diabetes Association and spread the message, you know, research, awareness, education, how does this work? So, all four of you get a stab at this.
Obviously, maybe support funding. Also, ADA has a number of fundraisers. For example, the Step Out Walk, I believe, which takes place every year, and you can team up as an organization and raise funding for not only research but also camps and other outreach programs that ADA sponsors. I think some of you already touched on it. Just helping with education. Maybe funding some individuals to go to one of these camps. Yeah, I guess that's my scoop. I suppose.
Yes. I think the model that my church has is a good one and could be implemented in other churches, is that we have the education support ministry at the church. Let's bring information and services to people at a place that's accessible and comfortable for them. And of course, participating in the ADA's fundraising activities. Our church does that. I have a small group, but in our small group, and participating over the years, we've raised over $78,000 to help fund and find a cure for diabetes. So even if you don't want to walk, you can support someone else who is walking. At church, we also participate in different programs that the ADA has, and so you can bring those programs to your church. So I think that's how people can support the ADA.
I think you can support the ADA certainly by funding, but also by referring people to the ADA. I'm looking around the room, and if we said, you know, actually the numbers are about 900,000 people in Illinois have diabetes, and about 500,000 don't know they have diabetes. So it's the diabetes, the type 1, the type 2, the pre-diabetes, and the undetected diabetes. And just to give you a sense, I think you heard, it's no longer just, sometimes people refer to diabetes and dialysis as an old people's disease. Dialysis, more than half of the people on dialysis are under the age of 65. So again, we have an opportunity here in Illinois and Chicago to team up with the ADA and get the message out, because testing and management of diabetes is key. And I look around the room, and if the numbers are there, so 1 out of 12, 1 out of 11 in this room could have diabetes and may not even know it.
Those are all great answers. I would just say, I'm somebody who's been touched directly by camp and the walks, and I think volunteering, resources at camps, you know, supplies, all the great stories about things that you've provided globally to people that have really enhanced a lot of people's lives, and just supporting the walk. I'm a much more educated and therefore more powerful parent of a diabetic because of the things that ADA has taught me.
That's great. Well, thank you to all the panelists for your openness. I appreciate that. Let's open it up for questions. Hopefully there are a lot of great questions. Ladies first.
Oh, thank you. I'd be interested to know what, in terms of the education on the preventative, what prevents diabetes? I mean, we were having a discussion at our table about the amount of sugar in so many things, and what goes on with the ADA on a preventative basis to educate people on what they may not realize they're consuming.
So the question is, what is, in general, some preventative measures, but more specifically, what is the ADA doing about the topic of prevention? Correct?
Correct.
Anybody just shout it out?
I'll just start out. In terms of the glucose monitoring that was talked about, how many of you know your scores? How many of you trend your scores? Because it's one thing to know your present score, but are you getting better or are you getting worse? And have you trended that? So I think there's a lot that, you know, working with the ADA, knowing about scores, knowing how to look at them, understand them, and work with families and friends. I have a colleague that he didn't even know. He's a trainer and outreach educator, a former Rotarian, Michael Townsend, and he works with me in terms of diabetes education and prevention. And he said, you know, he started talking to his family. He didn't even know some of his family members had diabetes. So he's connected them. He said, you know, I can't help you. You're all around the country, but ADA has locations all around the country that can be of assistance to you. So I think there's a lot that we can do to help not only ourselves, but family members and friends. And certainly the ADA, to me, is a great resource for information and advocacy.
In terms of prevention as well, in addition to monitoring your glucose, actually being aware of that, the #1 risk factor for type 2 diabetes is obesity. And that's why much of the research on diabetes has also been on obesity and linking the two. Obviously, when you think about obesity, food comes into play. Reduce your food intake. That would be a goal, that you would reduce your risk remarkably. Not only diabetes, but also other diseases. So overall, it's just good to lose weight. Obviously, we prefer you to, consume good foods, not, okay, I'll reduce my intake, but I'm going to have my chocolate bar every day. Obviously, we don't want you to be on a diet, just like so you have your chocolate bar. But obviously, whole grains and lean meats and poultry. And coffee. I would say coffee, but not the type of.
How many cups? How many cups?
Well, actually, the new guidelines are up to 4. They haven't increased it. They've never been guidelines. This is
the first time they.
First time they have guidelines. They say that
4 cups.
they don't tell you to drink 4 cups, but they tell you that if you're already consuming 4 cups, it's safe. But this is coffee. We're not talking about adding all that sugar and all the milk. And we know sugar definitely, there's actually been I don't know what it is in Illinois, I'm kind of out of the loop on that, but the sugar tax, the idea behind that was really to, enforce some sort of intervention to prevent some of these diseases that are a result of obesity, because there's a strong link between the two.
In regards to type 1 diabetes prevention, I could take my daughter, she's almost 4, I could take her and they could prick her finger, get her blood, and basically sort of map her genome. And if there are things on her genetic code that sort of are like markers or like risk factors, I'll have that information. Not so much because it's a family thing, but they've mapped so many genomes of people like myself that have type 1 diabetes. So, there's a huge data bank of all of this, and so I could take my daughter and they could see if she's really at risk for it. Now, I don't know exactly if I think they do some sort of prevention at that point, maybe to sort of reduce the time to onset of when you would develop type 1 diabetes, because it's an autoimmune disease, there's a trigger. But I don't know the latest and newest on that forefront, but there are ways to sort of see if you're at risk with your type 1. We'll continue with the ladies first, because I know that she had her hand up really quick.
Josh, can I just ask that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. Lisa, with respect to what the ADA is doing, thank you so much for that question. A couple people have mentioned Expo, which 10,000 people from around this region come to Expo every year. It's held in April. And it's really a one-stop shop for healthcare for people a lot in at-risk communities. Additionally, hopefully in Chicago, within the next year or two, the ADA is going to be piloting Camp Power Up, which is a camp for children who have been diagnosed with prediabetes or are at risk for diabetes. So hopefully in 2017 or 2018, we'll be seeing Camp Power Up. We're always out in the health centers, health fairs, trying to reach out through faith-based communities, get into the at-risk communities, and really reduce the prevalence of diabetes in these families, in these hard-to-serve communities.
Hi, my name is Esther Parkus. I'm with Alivio Medical Center. We're a federally qualified health center. We have about 5,000 diabetics that we work with. I'm curious for you to share the financial burden that diabetes and the treatment of diabetes has on an individual? Because I know serving the underserved, that sometimes can be a barrier for our patients, the cost of medication, syringes. So if you could please share with the group the financial burden.
On average, it's about $6,500 a year for an individual. And the glucose strips, as somebody had mentioned, that's typically not covered under many insurance plans, and so that's extra out of somebody's pocket. So if you're testing quite a few times a day, it also, the financial...
They're expensive.
They are
That's
expensive.
why they make the meters free.
Yes, yeah, the meters are free. Something has to change on that one. And there's also the cost of diabetics. I just looked at the statistics for Illinois, and I have them here. It was about 22,000 were hospitalized with diabetes as the primary reason for hospitalization, and over 250,000 people with diabetes were hospitalized, not as a primary but as secondary, and sometimes with the secondary condition, say you have a cardiac disease or pulmonary, it can exacerbate and it can really complicate the treatment, and it can actually drive the condition to a worse state. So it's very expensive for, the person to manage the diabetes, but also for the healthcare community, it's a huge cost.
In the hospital, like if someone, say, passes away from having a stroke or a heart attack, that's the main reason why they passed away, correct? So diabetes is an underlying disease, so that doesn't really get caught as a cause of death, correct?
You are so correct. It's one of the challenges. It's always up for debate at the national level. When you have somebody that dies of a condition, say it's a heart attack, it could have been driven by the diabetes. So diabetes isn't listed as the primary reason. It's the heart attack. It's the most, the one that drove it. But again, diabetes, you're more likely to go on dialysis. Dialysis, you have a 5-year life expectancy on dialysis. Again, your readmission rate to a hospital is about 35% of patients are readmitted within 30 days that are on dialysis. So again, the cost is tremendous, the burden that people bear, and if there's a way we can prevent it, as well as provide some management and support for those with diabetes and family members, because diabetes, it's not just a person has it, the whole family cares, and so the whole family is affected. So there are opportunities.
Well, along the same lines, we have a question to make the link between diabetes and heart disease, which you sort of have. I think the statistic shows about almost close to twice the risk of having a stroke or a heart attack if you do have diabetes.
It is. I mean, it's a complication, because even if you're in a hospital and they're trying to manage you, it used to be that there was a diabetes floor in a hospital. Now, because diabetes is so prevalent, everyone in the hospital is supposed to be trained in how to manage and how to look for symptoms of a diabetic patient, because it is, and it increases the risk of any chronic condition that you have or acute condition. You're at higher risk for deaths and complications, more complications.
So the reason why that happens is it likes to attack like small arteries. So we're talking about eyes, like kidneys, arteries around the kidneys, the arteries around your heart, and the arteries around your feet. So basically, you could, in surgery, you can see this. You see an artery that's basically stiff as can be. It doesn't expand. There's no elasticity to it, and it's getting smaller and smaller. So obviously, when you talk about the foot level, the arteries are really small compared to your aorta, but it sort of drives the fact home that all these small little arteries that are in your body are basically closing up and becoming really calcified and hard. So we know that things like cardiovascular disease, like strokes, the small arteries in the brain, these are all things that are affected so much by diabetes.
Peter, you have a question.
Is it possible to put a dollar number to the burden to our society by this disease?
1 in 5. 1 in 5.
Like the cost to it?
The total cost to the
Yeah, I actually I had that written down here.
That's such an evidence.
Josh, 1 in 5.
So the cost of
1 in 5 healthcare dollars.
1 in 5 healthcare dollars. Well, that's a pretty big one. So there's
1 in 5 healthcare dollars spent caring for diabetics.
Known diabetic. That does not
Known
include
diabetics.
things
It's not
that are triggered
necessarily
by-
caring for their diabetes, but it's caring for diabetics.
So in 2012, $245 billion in the United States. 176 of that was directly to medical costs, and 69 billion was due to decreased productivity in the workplace. So that's
And for Illinois, I had some statistics, it's about $7 billion a year in healthcare costs, and on average, they expect that a diabetic will miss 2 days of work, so it's about $183 million of loss in productivity.
2 days of work in what period?
In a year. In a year.
What about the parents of a child?
Well, that's another, the parents that have to care for the child.
Actually, you've been raising your hand for a long time. So.
Yeah. Do any of you have any comments about the sweetened beverage tax which the county board has just enacted?
We'll start with the hospital district.
I'm on the Illinois Public Health Institute, which was the driver. I'm on their board, which was the driver behind the tax. And they've been trying to get it at an Illinois level, but starting at the county level is great.
If the money goes to where it's supposed to go, then I think it's a great idea, because that's sort of what we see in the hospital is we see a whole bunch of patients that maybe they're not insured, and the costs are being put on someone. And if they're being put on someone that's funded by local government, at least the tax could sort of offset some of those costs. I mean, that starts a really, 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 really big discussion, I think. Yeah.
One last question, please, Alita.
Most people here know I'm a chef, and so I tell people all the time, you could pay your grocer or pay your doctor, but they don't listen to me. But as a chef, though, I understand type 1 and type 2, and my grandmother was diagnosed with diabetes at 80. So, and she's 92, so she's doing great. She is one of the few that she changed her diet instantly. She was like, okay, she'll tell you in a minute, I'm hungry, and I need to go eat. Man, you're like, yes, ma'am. She's like, I have diabetes, I need to go eat. That's what she says all the time. It's hilarious. But I have friends that I've seen it more and more that they come to me because they get gestational diabetes when they get pregnant, and I don't know what to tell them. Because I can handle type 1 and type 2 and all of that, but I don't know how to help them with their dietary concerns when it comes to gestational diabetes, so they are healthy and their baby is healthy during that time. Is there anything you could help me understand that more and a little bit more?
I kind of wish that my colleague at Northwestern was here, because she's actually running a clinical trial on gestational diabetes and some potential intervention methods to prevent gestational diabetes. And one of the goals of their intervention is really just to keep the weight down. We don't want the mothers gaining weight quickly, especially when you conceive and you're already overweight. They're the ones that have increased risk. And also, I believe being older too, as we know, nowadays women are waiting a little longer to have children, and at that stage they're already at increased risk. In terms of diet, I guess.
It's usually really, really restricted because they take it really serious, and a lot of women actually get put on insulin like more quickly than let's say someone who just got diagnosed with type 2. So they take it really seriously. The weight loss is a huge thing with that. The baby's born significantly overweight. That's not good for that baby. I mean, there's issues in utero, but you're also setting the baby up for long-term complications. They've done studies that link, pregnant women with gestational diabetes to type 2 diabetes in adolescents. So there definitely is some concern there, absolutely. So they should be really, really strict with their diet. And it's a really big risk factor for type 2 diabetes. So if a woman has gestational diabetes, there's a very good chance that later on in life they'll develop type 2 diabetes. A lot of that has to do with some of the hereditary factors, but it's a big increase risk.
Well, in the interest of time, could we possibly just thank our panel for their comments, their expertise. We are going to continue this discussion with Nelson Burrell. Nelson, with the silver message discussion. So if you have more individual questions, the panel has agreed to stay after and talk a little bit more. We got a couple of things that we want to do housekeeping-wise. So if I could ask, could I thank the panel, and could we please ask you just to kind of hang around for a bit?
Absolutely.
Okay. Because I have some tokens of appreciation from RotaryOne, which are hourglasses, which we will subsequently hopefully cure diabetes with time, if that's okay. Okay. What I'd like to do at this time, if I can, is just kind of begin the wrap-up of the presentation. Peter, you asked to come to the podium to speak about an upcoming event. This is part of what we do at Rotary in terms of for the holidays. So Peter, could you please share with us about these?
Sure. Hi everybody, I'm going to be Lisa for a moment. So every year, as you know, we support one of the holiday events for the Easter Seals organization. We basically throw a holiday party for one of their centers where they take care of autistic children. That is a week from Thursday on December 8th. And Walt has volunteered to be Santa Claus again. I'm not going to say Santa baby. And Larry has volunteered to be there to take pictures again. And we need a few more volunteers as storytellers and help out a little bit. So if you have time, a week from Thursday between 3 and 5 p.m., please get in touch with either me or Lisa Russ, or Dave or Nancy. They all will forward the email to the right person. We would love for you to help us out. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Connor, yeah, also could I ask President-elect Connor G to come to the podium to make an announcement?
Yeah, I just briefly, obviously it's Giving Tuesday, most of you know we have Black Friday and Cyber Monday, but Giving Tuesday is to give to nonprofit organizations, and you guys have the American Diabetes Association pledge form on your chairs. So after you give to the ADA, keep your credit cards out or your checkbooks out, and continue to give to our own foundation, the Rotary Club of Chicago Foundation, as well as RotaryOne Foundation. So we just kicked off our annual fundraising campaign. Our goal this year is $65,000. We've already raised 13 of that, so we're well on our way. But I would just ask that you guys give. There are also donation forms for both the RotaryOne Foundation as well as the Rotary International Foundation on the podium in the back when you walk out. You will also be receiving those in the mail later this week or the following week. So please give something because that allows us to support organizations like the ADA and others through our Job One program, through our dictionary program, and through a lot of other programs that we do here in the city. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Connor. What we're also going to ask those of you here in the audience to do is, much like we have done a photo for Ending Polio Now, at the end of this meeting, if anyone can possibly stay around, people from ADA would like to have a photo taken with all of us, try to kind of draw the awareness, if that's okay. We will be having Silver Messer as well, but at this time, we have some visiting international Rotarians. If I could ask you to rise and to let us know who you are, where you come from, Dr. Machado, please. Just if you could just let us know what you're doing here in Chicago, and please, welcome.
I'm very glad to be here, and it was a pleasure to participate of this lunch meeting. And I would like to spend a few words with you right now. just a message. I believe in the friendship among the people. And the goodwill and the love will be the power that moves the humanity to the understanding and the peace. Amen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor. And Doctor did his undergrad work in endocrinology, so very timely. Not only is it just a domestic education excellence, but we also have some international excellence with us here as well. Oh, yes, and, yeah, please. And, could you introduce your daughter as well?
You can do it from here.
I just thank you, Barry. I came with my father, and every year I was in Chicago in the meeting at RCNA because I sent something, my father radiologist, and thank you a lot for here. And I would like that the opportunity to invite everybody to know Brazil. Yes, and my city is Aracaju, is small, but a big heart. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I know we have a lot of guests as well, but what I'd like to do at this point in time is, because we're kind of running a little tight on time, if it's okay. If there are any other visiting Rotarians, please let us know. If we want to exchange banners, we can at the end of this meeting. But I know that the judge has to be in court very quickly here, so I don't want to delay.
But the beauty is they wait. It's really good.
It's good to be the judge, I guess, okay? But those of you who want to stay around and have a photo taken, as well as continuing the discussion with Sober Mesa with Nelson, I would like to do that at this time. So let me conclude this meeting, and for those of you who have to leave, thank you once again for joining us here at RotaryOne. Thank you.